Ilmadira anaya tu falata tu dini dugalo la era jabau kaunita ni tongomna ramnu tikin kamsona dugani sakabatu kumani sakabatu nufinera barana bajira goda kaunde ni bilisona gamru malamu dalonda Fadu tirano sinara rasini Waranto jabe fadu tirano sinara rasini Ajiendo enganu topsi agara kona rakini topsi akalbi kona rasini Dal tumara budate dal sawako tane fate altumadang gudate gor sawago tade kalbe fate sodani timulane te bisa fusmayo akekate e yosef gamachufa akekate Karmame kerare irraburake dadate irrabutane kerare irrakarmame Ajieko rengi challenge sadese shira gantu tu balese shira yantu tu balese atindure dua jirandu ejalta galkata basa kanyate waniti mani mufata tiki wada mutame nakasa wakif jaga madame Iki wadang utame nagasa wakif jaga madabe sanyi lenjo mishero bakawe sati kanitite enala mukite san kanitite dadando sodang kamne sabako divangkali dajade dadando sodang kamne sabako divangkali dajade Kiram sonde bunsa bunde timahim baredoksa ada timahim baredoksa waninone didenyufu waninone boruju waninone kumache nyanone falmatera tugadam kenne la pesa sabab duwe mundesa kanduma bable jaldesa ya komoko wabai ke sabate beki sena ke sabate tokuman nakatate fakenya walin kaba jarapa kada faile fida fakenya walin kaba jarapa kada faile fida Hormati cinna male ni bamna dugan sama lipada hani babu sama lipada Mustafa Husaini fi dari galam famal tu dagata Mustafa Husaini fi dari galam famal tu dagata duratu madakamna kupi madai rati mada aduh kupi madai rati mada amantida putangan dana jambaru kota di Kenya kakali warna bodi tokonari kupatera enyutu di dalam misa finai warna kumasi juga bante sabni basi basta masa kumaje basta masa baru malega dintenyu dinang karanis gadiza Durwali timir matu godan Oromo bakka biqitti fageenyaa dannoo wilee yoosu wal ga'uu qaba kibbatti fakkeenyaa yaa fudhannu taagarii tulluu baakar waaretti intaadda isaa birruu faadamsaa dhiyootti miliyoonni gungumee inni itti cabsee gaafa barkumee miliyoonni gungumee inni dubbatee gaafa barkumee wayyoo nama mararuu gootonni akka saamee kattu dhumee leenconni akka saamee kattu dhumee ilma dhiiraa anaa nyaatu falantaatu dhiigni dhugaa lola'eera jabaa hoggaan firiintaatu ni tokkoomna irraaf nuti kinqabsoomna dhugaan isaa qabaatu gumaan isaa qabaatu nufineerra karaan nabaa jirra goota ta'ullee ni bilisoomna gabrummaa laannu dhaloota nufineerra karaan nabaa jirra goota ta'ullee ni bilisoomna gabrummaa laannu dhaloota nufineerra karaan nabaa jirra goota ta'ullee ni bilisoomna gabrummaa laannu dhaloota.
Yes. Okay. Somehow I cannot simultaneously see what's going on. No, that's not going to work. Okay, we'll try it this way. So thank you again for inviting me. What I want to talk with you about is the violations of human rights in Ethiopia in connection with the Lega Dembi gold mine. I work at our Center for International Human Rights at Northwestern Law School in Chicago. And I've been working with a number of advocates, including a couple of NGOs in Ethiopia for about 2 years now on this issue of the Lega Dembi mine. If my screen sharing is working, I now have up in front of you, the map of Ethiopia. I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but right here right near Shakiso is the Lega Dembi mine. This is a massive gold mine that has really taken over the community life because of the consequences of the contamination, the pollution from the mine. For centuries, the indigenous Guji people in this area have pursued an agro-pastoral way of life, raising livestock and farming on ancestral lands in the area where the mine now exists. In 1997, Ethiopia granted a 20-year mining license to a private company called Midrock, which is probably well known to some of you. Midrock is owned by a Saudi billionaire with an Ethiopian mother. Through his various companies, he is the largest private employer in Ethiopia. Now, before Midrock got this license, gold mining there had been gold mining in that area with a government-owned franchise. And before that, there were smaller artisanal and other miners in the area. But when Midrock got the license in 1997, they vastly expanded the size and the scale of the mine, causing massive deforestation and the exclusion of the Guji people from portions of their ancestral land. In 2009, Midrock obtained an additional license for an adjacent mine they called Sakara Gold Mine, which is an underground mine connected by tunnel to the original Lega Dembi open pit mine. Over all the years that this mining went on and expanded, the local people were never given any voice in the decisions to allow the mine to operate and to allow it to expand. For many years, local people complained about the mine's impact on their health and on the well-being of their communities. People in the community developed many health problems, including tumors, headaches, skin conditions, and vision problems. The pollution from the mine also affected their livelihood. Crops withered, and people who ate what they grew, as they always had done, but now when they ate their own, what they produced, they became sick. Livestock died, other livestock became sickened. The bones of the cows or the steer became rubbery and weak, so that they couldn't be used for plowing, for example. The community also complained that they really got no economic benefit from the mine, because the people who were hired to work in the mine, almost all of them came from far away. It was not the local people who were getting the economic benefit. The most devastating impact of the mine, however, was on the children, as is so often the case. So I've shown you two pictures here that show some of the victims of this mine. The mine has caused a very high rate of miscarriages and stillbirths in the area around the mine, and a very high rate of children being born with very serious physical and developmental disabilities. Some so serious that the children die very soon after they're born. The first picture I have here, this is of a 5-year-old girl who I met, and the people, a group from my school went to Ethiopia in January of 2019, and we met with a large number of people, including parents of some of the children who've been born with disabilities, including the mother of this little girl whose legs are shown. The mother had previously suffered 2 late-term miscarriages. This is her daughter, who's now 5, and of course, because of the deformity of her limbs, she can't walk. It makes her cry that she can't go to school like other kids can. The other members of their family have had health problems as well, and they've suffered. Their crops and their livestock have suffered, to the point that although they had always been self-sustaining before, now the parents have to work as day laborers in order to be able to, feed the family. The second picture here was taken by a journalist named Tom Gardner, who just wrote a few months ago, published an article, a long article on Legadembe in the New Humanitarian, which is a publication, an online publication by a group an entity that documents human rights and humanitarian atrocities around the world. The New Humanitarian grew out of what once upon a time was a UN newspaper that was established to document humanitarian crises that were not getting enough attention. Some years ago, it became an independent journalistic operation, and Tom Gardner writes for them and for a couple of other media outlets. And he went to the Shakiso area, and you can see this child who was only 2 months old in this photograph, and which was taken probably about February or so of this year. And since then, the child has died from the disabilities were that serious. So how does the mine cause these problems? There are massive failures of mine management. The way Midrock has run this mine has no regard for the health and safety of the local community. So, for example, toxic waste from a mine goes into something called a tailings pond. And at Midrock, and conventionally, there's a series of 3 very large ponds. The first one is where the toxic waste flows immediately from the processing of the gold and the mining operation. And then then there's a dam, and then there's a second pond where the waste water is supposed to be cleaned up somewhat. Then another dam, and then another pond, which is supposed to be even cleaner. And theoretically, only when the water is purified is it supposed to run out into the stream below. That people use for household use. Well, Midrock has never put up a fence around these toxic tailings ponds. So people lacking other good water supplies have been watering their livestock in these poison ponds. They have been, some even take water for household use, such as drinking and cooking, as well as bathing. The fact that these ponds are there, they're accessible to the public. There's no fencing, and until recently, we were told there was not even any kind of a warning sign saying that the people should stay away. Or another problem with the mine is that, as you can imagine, if you have a very large pond, body of water that is poisonous, and you know it's poisonous, you have to do something at the bottom of the pond so that the water, the poison water, does not leach into the groundwater. I'm not a rocket scientist, but it doesn't take much to figure out that you have to have some kind of a liner if you're not going to be poisoning the entire water supply. Any decent mine has several impermeable layers of a liner at the base of the tailings pond, but not the Midrock mine. They have no impermeable liner at the base of the pond where this poisonous toxic waste is deposited. And so what happens is the water just leaches out into the rest of the water supply. So one problem is the way the mine has been run. The related problem is the complete failure of the state to have any kind of regulatory oversight. Ethiopia has a lot of environmental laws. The Ethiopian constitution has guarantees that are beautiful. Things are supposed to be done in proper ways, but because of a lack of capacity and a lack of will, there's never been any proper regulatory oversight of the mine. So what does it produce? We now have seen evidence that the water and the sediment and soil in the area around Legadembe is contaminated with mercury, is contaminated with arsenic. When the mine is operating, it's contaminated with cyanide. These are terrible toxins that can cause the kinds of health consequences that the people have been complaining about for a very long time. So all of this came to a head in the spring of 2018, when Midrock's 20-year license for the mine was coming to an end. And so Midrock applied for a 10-year extension or renewal of their license. As part of the renewal process, Midrock commissioned Addis Ababa University Business Enterprises, a business that's somehow associated with AAU, but is not really, does not speak for AAU. They were hired to do an assessment of the mine's environmental impact. We are suspicious about this assessment, in part because all of the lab work was done by a client, a longtime client of Midrock, which in our view means that it's not truly an independent assessment. There were other problems with the assessment, but be that as it may, the assessment report is extremely critical of the Legadembe mine. It is from that assessment report that I learned that there is no liner at the base of these poisonous ponds. And the report pointed out, documented the lack of oversight by Midrock itself and the lack of governmental oversight. So this report had a lot of criticisms, but the report was kept secret by the government. It is still kept secret. When I visited Ethiopia in January 2019, which was 9 months after the report had been written, nobody I talked to had the report. Nobody knew how to get the report. They were not even sure this report existed. And in fact, later on, somehow a copy of the report found its way into my email inbox. So I've now read it, and I know what it says. But it would be frankly dangerous for people in Ethiopia to, publish the report or make it or spread it widely. Midrock is viewed as being very powerful, and the Legadembe mine is a very sensitive topic. So Midrock has the report commissioned. They keep the report secret. In late April or the very beginning of May 2018, the Ministry of Mining renews the license for 10 years. The community had opposed this. The Minister of Mining goes out to the community and says, there was an assessment and it showed that everything is fine, which is completely untrue because now I've read the assessment and it does not say that everything's fine. And the people in the community, because of their experience living near the mine, they knew the mine was not fine. But in any event, the license is renewed, and that is met with large protests, very large protests, militant protests. And so in May of 2018, this is shortly after Prime Minister Abiy comes to power, very shortly after that. In the face of these protests, the government suspended Midrock's license, and that shut down the mine. And at that time, the government said the right thing. The government said that there would be an independent assessment of the mine. And a government spokesperson was quoted in a couple of news media as saying that once the assessment is complete, and I quote here from a newspaper report, operations would resume if and when all stakeholders agree on the result of that investigation. That's the right approach. You need to find out what is going on with the mine, and you need to involve all stakeholders, and in particular the community, in deciding what happens next. Unfortunately, things did not play out the way according to the promises that were made at that time. Assessments were going to be done. Canada stepped in and offered to pay for the assessment, and a team of Canadian experts was assigned to work on this project. The local community is not happy about that. The people we talked to said there should have been an open process for selecting who the experts would be, instead of the government just choosing someone, which made them suspicious. The next thing that made us suspicious is that the experts never went to the mine. And you simply cannot do an environmental impact assessment of a mine if you don't go there. You need to go there, you need to see the layout of the mine, you need to take samples of water and groundwater and surface water, soil, sediment. You need to talk to the people. None of that was done. Instead, we've been told that the Canadian expert did put together some kind of a desk review, some kind of a report on the environmental impact based on reviewing earlier documents and based on, we think, some interviews with Midrock employees and Ministry of Mining people. We've never seen this report. The government has never made this public. And again, they don't even completely say there is such a report, though I believe that one was at least written, whether or not the government accepted the report. And we've been told that the report was critical, which it would have to be if it was based on the earlier spring 2018 report, which was highly critical. So that report, that assessment was never properly done. There was no independent environmental impact assessment done. And whatever was done has been kept secret from the people, and including the community nearby. The government also undertook to have a health impact assessment. This was supposed to have two parts. The first part was people going door to door with a survey of a lot of questions about health-related questions. And the survey was administered to about 3,000 households in the communities very close to the mine. Now, in order to do this kind of a survey, you have to get the cooperation of the people. They have to be willing to give you very personal information about their health status, their children's, and so on. And in order to get their cooperation, the people were promised that the government would share the results with them. And so people did cooperate. More than 90% of the people who were approached participated in this very long and very personal survey. A report was prepared based on this survey, and at that point, the government broke its promise. They did not share the results with the local community. So this report is still to this day secret. The second part of the health assessment never took place. That part of the health assessment would have been actually an examination of the people, taking hair samples, blood samples, fingernail samples, to see how contaminated the people themselves are. They were going to measure toxic contamination in people upstream from the mine. That's the control group, to see how they are. And then also examine people who live near the mine and then a little further downstream from the mine. But that part of the study never happened. There was a third study on the socioeconomic impact of the mine. This study was conducted by a research team from Dilla and Bulawayo universities. Their report was critical of the mine, and the government refused to accept the report. And all of the researchers on all of these reports have been told they cannot share the reports with anyone without the government's permission. So we now have a report written in March of 2018 on the environmental impact, and we have 3 reports written in 2019 on the health, environmental, and socioeconomic impact. And none of this has been made public. Let me go to another slide here. The journalist who took one of the photos of the children, the article he wrote, I'd recommend you read it. It's called Health Woes, Outrage, and Toxins Near Ethiopia Gold Mine. We Are the Walking Dead. And I have a link here, but if you just Google the new humanitarian Lega Dembi, you will get to it. Somehow Tom Gardner, the journalist who wrote this story, somehow he got access to the secret health report. And from what he reports in this article, in the article that he published, the data that were gathered in the survey show that the area very close to the mine has the highest level of children born with birth defects of any part of Ethiopia. You know, it documents high numbers of miscarriages, stillbirths, children born with disabilities, and other health problems among the population. This is very important information, and it's not been made public. Let me see. So what's my role in all of this, or what's the role of my Center for International Human Rights? You know, there are no easy solutions to these problems. The last speaker said, what are we going to do besides writing a report? Something has to be done. But it's always harder to come up with what the something is than to find the problem. In my view, in order to really solve the problem of Lega Dembi, either the current government is going to have to be persuaded that the mine should not be allowed to reopen, until the problems are solved and until the people are compensated. Either the current government needs to do that, or in the new elections, whenever they may be, there needs to be a government that will make that a priority. But the small part that my program, my Center for International Human Rights, has been doing is we have been asked by the people we work with in Ethiopia to try to get international attention to the problem of Legadembe as a human rights problem, that this is not just an economic decision for the government to make, that this is a human rights problem of international concern. And so over the last 2 years, our Center for International Human Rights has been submitting reports to various UN human rights mechanisms talking about this problem and calling on these mechanisms to urge the Ethiopian government to do the right thing here. So, for example, in February of 2018, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. In February of 2019, we went to the United Nations in Geneva when a committee called the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women was holding an evaluation session to see whether or not Ethiopia had complied with its treaty obligations as a state party to the convention, the treaty against discrimination against women. This treaty has a very strong provision protecting the rights of rural women, including, among other things, the right to a healthy environment and the right to be involved in decision-making concerning their own people's own communities. So we went to that committee and we filed a report, and we went there in person to talk with the members of the committee. The committee, the abbreviation is CEDA. Based on our report and the information we brought, I have on the screen now what CEDA said to the government of Ethiopia at the end of these reviews. The committee sends what it's called its concluding observations to the state. The concluding observations start by saying, these are the things we think you're doing well. We're very pleased about that. And then the rest of the report is statements of concern followed by recommendations. So the committee here notes that the state party, that's Ethiopia, temporarily closed the Legadembe mine and is undertaking an assessment. But the committee says it is concerned at the grave health, environmental, and socioeconomic impacts of the operation of the mine on Guji women and their families. And then the committee recommends that the state ensure full transparency and independence in the assessment process, publish and share the results with the Guji people, address the environmental and health damages, and provide adequate reparations and compensation to the victims. This hasn't happened yet. It's not when international entities say do something, that does not mean that governments immediately do something. But we do believe that the Abiy government, that the current government of Ethiopia cares about its international image with respect to human rights. And so, for example, when during the meeting of the CEDA committee, at these meetings, the members of the committee ask questions of a group of representatives of the government of Ethiopia. And because of our report, one of the committee members asked some questions about the Legadembe mine. And in response, the spokesperson or the representative of the state acknowledged that there had been strong community concerns over, and I quote here, over the allegations that toxic emissions from the mine had caused the population different health side effects and ailments. He pledged, quote, as soon as the findings of these assessments are completed, if indeed the mine is found to have been responsible for the toxic waste and the resultant health effects on the communities around the mines, he promised that the state would take appropriate action. And he specifically said, Ethiopia does have adequate legal framework to hold the mine accountable and also to make sure, number one, that it pays due compensation, and number two, that it does not resume functions until the toxic waste has been resolved and no longer poses a threat. That's what the government of Ethiopia said in February of 2019. That's what we're trying to hold them to. We're trying to do our advocacy, in conjunction with people in Ethiopia, of course, to try to pressure the government so that they keep that promise and that they do not reopen the mine. Unfortunately, since about October of last year, we have been getting reports that there are efforts being made to reopen the mine. We keep hearing it might happen any day, it might be imminent, but it has not happened. Why not? Could be lots of reasons. It could be the complexity of the security situation. When it looked like elections were going to be held, it might have been that the government did not want this kind of controversy right before the elections. Maybe now something about the pandemic plays into this. All in all, we are very pleased that the mine has not reopened, and we still hope that there is room for the advocacy of people in Ethiopia, supplemented by what some of us can do internationally, that advocacy will be successful. We like to think there may be some people, even in the current government, who believe that what's happening with Legadembe is wrong. There are probably people in the present government who think that the hard currency that has been foregone by closing the mine, that they need to have that hard currency. So the situation is not clear as to which of these views will ultimately have the upper hand. But in the meantime, we keep trying to do this kind of international advocacy. In the fall, another human rights mechanism, the UN Human Rights Committee, is going to begin its review of whether or not Ethiopia has complied with its obligations under the International Covenant, that's a treaty on civil and political rights. And we're also we'll be submitting a report later this summer to complain to the committee about two things. One is the entire threat to life and human health and the rights of the child that occur because of the operation of the gold mine and the past operation of the mine, which has never been cleaned up or compensated. And second, we're going to complain to the committee specifically about the state's refusal to make public these very important reports that show toxic levels of mercury and arsenic and cyanide, that show that the reports that document the poor administration of the mine and the failures of Ethiopia's own regulatory oversight, and the reports that document the health consequences. So those are the efforts we're making right now. We hope this all works out for the best. We could not do this advocacy if we didn't at least have the hope that it might make a difference and that Ethiopia might do the right thing in terms of ensuring that due compensation is paid and that the mine does not resume functioning until the toxic waste has been cleaned up and no longer is a threat. So that's our hope, and that's what we're working on. I would encourage you to read this very good article that's in the New Humanitarian, and through your own networks, I would encourage you to share this.
Okay, thank you. We're going to give each one of you some more to say in conclusion at the end. So we will move on. Thank you very much, Professor Bridget.